One commit down, two to go. You're locked on UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And welcome to the only podcast on UConn that is undefeated since its inception. Yes, we started after the Creighton game, and we haven't lost since. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Well, happy Commitment Wednesday, everyone. The first domino has dropped for the Huskies, getting confirmation of Tarris Reed Jr., a.k.a. Big Hoss, the 6'11", 260-pound center. Reed transfers from Michigan. He is an immediate impact player for Dan Hurley and the Huskies. Reed is going to be a guy who, by the end of the year, this kid is going to be a big part of their offense, giving him the opportunity to be around guys who've done it before. Singhair and Johnson. And how are they going to control, the expectation of Tarris Reed Jr.? The way I would look at it like this, he is a perfect commitment for UConn. And we're going to talk about what's a bad commitment, because no one right now thinks anybody they get is a bad commit. We'll talk about that later in the show. But just being around guys like Samson Johnson, Singhair, guys like Alex Caravan, who we expect to be back, the fundamentals, how they control their screening, their slips, the intricacies of the offense, how they use their body up top for screens, the drills that they use with the receivers' gloves, that we've had guys who talk about that, just fundamental aspects that will make him trust his game more in this Dan Hurley, Luke Murray, Kamani Young, and of course Tom Moore's system. Can't forget Tom Moore. Remember, he's the GOAT. Playing with trust. He's got to play with trust, and I think that's been a big issue for him with a Juwan Howard led team at Michigan. Look, you're going from an 8-24 Michigan team that had a lot of promise because you're being sold on the fact that Juwan Howard played in the NBA, that he was recruiting some pretty good players. But let's face it, Juwan Howard was not a great college coach. It's really difficult to be that unbelievable player, that all-star NBA player, and then come in and dominate even at your alma mater. Kevin Ollie comes to mind, but he won a national championship. I mean, it's like comparing apples to sea bass. I mean, they're not the same. It's a similar conundrum because Kevin Ollie couldn't sustain that, and thank God for it, because we wouldn't have this Dan Hurley-led squad. But I digress. This is about Tarris Reed. He's going to be playing with trust, playing with that speed that he has that's God-given, and playing with instinct. If you watch him play, you see some of these great post moves, the ability to kind of fake in, spin around, very, very much like an Adama Sanogo, a very raw Adama Sanogo. So concerns for him on his hands. That's we had a guest on at Rivals, Brock Healy, who brought that in, and it's warranted. If you watch enough of it, he did fumble the ball a little bit, but that is a part of kind of the offense. Eventually being able to, get in with these guys where they're taught ways. You can see the bigs have grown over the years, in particular with Adama and Donovan, and seeing some of that with Samson. We'll love to see how they do that with our guy Singhair. But it's one of those things where now with Tarris Reed Jr., even our old friend Ant Wright, who is a Big Ten scout, played at Michigan, NBA draft guy, college basketball content creator, who has quoted some pretty nasty things about UConn in the past, saying things like, well, the Big East is soft and the Big Ten is so much stronger. We're going to, when we play Purdue, it's going to be an issue, all this different stuff. Even Ant Wright was quoted as saying that he loves this move for Tarris a lot, right? And I also look at it like this. A guy like that loves the move for the kid. He also retweeted some garbage about how nobody wanted to come from an 8-24 team, or no one wants to recruit guys from that squad. So take that with a grain of salt, but you can see that some of the flowers that we're getting from unfamiliar places. But this commitment is a no drama value add, and with a ton of upside. I heard someone say, show me a bad commitment, like I talked about earlier in this segment. There are tons of bad commitments. You just don't know about it until later. Nobody truly talks about the numbers these kids get from an NIL perspective. And I have no clue what type of money Tarris Reed got. I know that he is an entrepreneur. He has a website. Go check it out, tarrisreedjr.com. Got some pretty good apparel there. I definitely want to buy myself a hoodie or a hat or something like that to show some support. But I can tell you that there are two really awful commits that Kansas got NIL-wise, portal-wise, is last year with Hunter Dickinson and Nick Timberlake. Hunter Dickinson took their NIL money, like all of it. I think it was something like $2 million, something ridiculous. And let's face it, that was an underwhelming signing. Was he a focal part of their offense? Sure. Did they have a ton of injuries? Yes. So there's context with that. But when you blow a huge NIL budget on one or two players and you don't get the results that you need, it looks silly. You know, we talked about this. Don't shop hungry. Don't ever shop hungry, right? When you go grocery shopping, make sure you have a nice, good meal so that you can stay within your budget. So all those saying we missed out on certain portal targets, be careful what you wish for, because Dan Hurley doesn't take flyers. It's completely vetted out. With those high dollar values comes drama. So comes all new problems for Dan Hurley, who hates this transfer portal but uses it to his advantage. He doesn't want these high value guys in terms of NIL money and really won't stand for it. So be glad your coach has some standards and we'll be just fine. So welcome aboard to Tarris Reed Jr., a.k.a. Big Hoss. Check out his website, tarrisreedjr.com. It's an unpaid endorsement. I got you, big guy. Looking at the kind of the scholarship players and who we have for this year, obviously you have your senior in Samson Johnson. You have junior Alex Caravan, who is obviously slated to come back. You have Tarris Reed as the backup center. I do definitely still think that Samson Johnson gets the starting nod. He knows the offense. Does he get himself into some foul trouble? Yes. But I think he'll be a little more disciplined this year. Every year they bring in referees to kind of show the guys the way that they're going to call games. And Samson gets a little itchy. He jumps on some stuff that he shouldn't do. But hopefully he'll put on some muscle and create that situation for UConn where he doesn't have to use his hands more and he can body up and kind of play like this, right? You still have Apostolos, Romalagu. I'm terrible at pronouncing that name. Solomon Ball. Obviously expecting Steph Castle to go pro. Still have Jaden Ross, Yusef Singhair, Jalen Stewart, and then our two freshmen, Isaiah Abraham and Amando L. So that leaves two open spots. Just two open spots. Technically three if Steph goes pro, which we're all expecting. So what does that mean? It means that there is a ton of talent left in this portal, and there is a particular former five-star recruit who I think could be an interesting pickup for Dan Hurley and the Huskies if they don't get their top targets. You know, we've talked about guys like Kobe Brea, Alex Hawson from Villanova, both 6'4", 6'5" guards, more shooting guards, obviously, or combo guards who can handle it a little bit. But we'll talk about this interesting prospect right after this. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists. Take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go. Let's get you to compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. And there's so much to do. Play under countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for their iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back in there, put on your game face, download Monopoly Go, now free in the App Store or Google Play. All right. So let's talk about the five-star recruit I'm referring to. It is DJ Wagner from Kentucky, son of former NBA guard DeJuan Wagner, is available. It remains to be seen if he's going to be following Coach Cal. We floated the idea of Zvonimir Ivisic going to UConn. Obviously, that was more of a pipe dream. I really do feel like there is, and obviously he followed Coach Cal to Arkansas, as I was pointed out to you by a million people on YouTube and on X. I understand the transfer portal is volatile. So when you float a name out there and you're wrong, I have no problem being wrong, guys. There are 1,374 recruits in the transfer portal, former players in college. If you float out 5 or 6 and you're wrong on all of them, my odds are about the same as any mainstream media that is reporting on the same stuff. So I'm doing some research on my own. DJ Wagner is from Camden, New Jersey. He's got that Jersey connection with Coach Hurley. Kamani Young is a Philly Jersey guy as well. It's how we got Ahmad Noel. Look, having a NBA guard father in DeJuan Wagner, who played for Cleveland and I believe he played with LeBron. It remains to be seen what the list is for him. I'm sure he's heard from a million coaches. DJ Wagner made his mark in high school as an aggressive scoring guard who played in constant attack mode on both ends of the floor. He was an elite. I'm going to read this twice because I want you guys to understand where I'm going with this. He was an elite competitor, played a high volume style, had increasing questions about his shooting ability. That's my only red flag, and ability to transition into more of a lead guard as his career went on. So now fast forward to Kentucky, some of those same scenarios started to evolve. It only intensified at Kentucky, obviously. Look, I think Cal did a pretty good job with that team this year. They obviously fell short. But this guy, DJ Wagner, needs a confidence boost. He needs to go to a program that can nurture his ability. And he only shot 30% behind the arc. He was in the 21st percentile as a spot-up shooter. That's according to Synergy Sports. But he put up better than 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. We've had guards who have come in who are not good shooters. No one would confuse Hassan Diarra with Ray Allen. Hassan Diarra is a pass-first dynamic guard who can get to the rim. But now take Hassan Diarra's ability and then times that by a 6'4" body that essentially was a McDonald's All-American who's lost some confidence in his ability, could come to UConn, not be asked to dominate the ball constantly, and get himself into pick and roll. He's fantastic in the pick and roll and would get himself worked up to. He's a good shooter. If you watch him shoot, he's got good form. He really gets off the floor. I just feel like he always when you watch him a little bit, he would get stuck in first gear. Just learning under Dan Hurley and Kamani Young how to pick his spots more effectively. He's nonetheless capable of being an absolute fantastic float game, getting paint touches, above average finisher at the rim. So he play, and again, he's not I'm trying to think of a dynamic guard. He's not Derrick Rose from Memphis, right? He's not playing above the rim like that. But at 6'4", even though he plays a more conservative game from an athlete perspective, he's an elite finisher. He still competes with a high motor. I just think when you look at the comps of the terms competition, both sides of the floor, aggressive, both defensively and offensively, able to pressure the ball. If I look at my YouTube mentions, whenever I float a name, the first question is, can he play defense? I don't even float guys' names out there that I don't think would be able to reach Dan Hurley's standards from a defensive side of the ball, because it's not worth our time. So equally as aggressive defensively and offensively, able to pressure the ball. So does he need to learn how to slow it down to times? Yes. Better at varying speeds like a Cam Spencer? 100%. But sometimes when you have that kind of Ferrari engine, you don't really know how to kind of throttle it down. But he could fit into Daniel Hurley's offense. My only red flag with this kid is that he had a reluctance to shoot. But I feel like we stepped that up with Steph Castle down the stretch, where you could just see Dan being like, shoot it. But could you imagine this kid in the pick and roll with Sampson, Johnson being able to rotate in and out with Ahmad Noel for the next 2 or 3 years? After Hassan Diarra leaves, again, expected to return. A lot of fun to run this offense, to be in constant motion, to be throwing lobs to bigs, throwing lobs to bigs like Tarris Reed Jr. in the future. Well, if you didn't know this already, I mentioned it a few times. It's Locked On's NFL Draft live April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series starting April 17th. That's today. At 7 o'clock Eastern to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft April 17th at 7 Eastern. Streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Well, who else can we talk about here? I want to dispel one name that I don't think they're going to look at all. Well, actually two. One is Jeremy Roach. Jeremy Roach, if they called him, it's out of respect that he is a four-year player at Duke. Well, I think someone made a comment to me. They were like, well, that's lazy to say that he's small or that, they don't want him. I don't think they reached out. According to sources that I talked to, he is being courted by Arkansas, Kentucky, and Kansas. I know Hunter Dickinson is trying to get him over to Kansas as well. I don't think we need a Jeremy Roach because if we don't get Kobe Brea, what's the point of having another point guard? Listen, Jeremy Roach can shoot. He's a 42% three-point shooter. He's played in big games, played in the Final Four. Leader. I think he's a good leader. Not great, good. I don't think I want a guy who's coming from that Duke culture of quote unquote the brotherhood. I just don't see them. I don't think Duke's culture is what UConn's culture is. I respect John Shire. I think that he was a good player. Don't necessarily know if he's ready for that job. But I just don't feel like having a 3 6 foot under 6'2" guards, where Jeremy Roach might be your tallest guard, is the way to go with UConn. The way they like to play, as physical as they like to play on defense, that doesn't mesh with me. So he would be a nice luxury ad, if you want to call it that. I just don't see that as someone that Dan Hurley is going to go after. And then another one, again, we talk about lazy takes. Matt Cross from UMass. This is his third time in the transfer portal. I think the limit for me, if I was Dan Hurley, would be 2 times. The Cam went to, he played at Loyola, he played at Rutgers, wanted to come for one last year. That's 3 teams. 3 teams in 5 years. That, I feel like, is an acceptable path. Don't ask me why, but I feel like if you're going to your 4th team in 5 years, there might be some commitment issues there. Some red flags. Remember, Dan Hurley talks about he recruits the parents as much as he recruits the players. So if you're constantly leaving a place that you said you loved earlier in the year and then things didn't go right, that's a red flag for me. I mean, I get it. UMass isn't exactly a sexy destination anymore, but they did win 20 games last year. They were in the A10. They felt like there was some momentum there. He averaged 15 points, I believe 15-8, right? 15-8-3. So he shot 54% from the field. And also, he's only a 32% three-point shooter. No, thank you. And I thought he was 6'8", 6'10". He's only 6'6", 6'7". I just don't think that that's who they want, especially with a guy like Liam McNeely coming in for a recruit. Let's take the younger 5-star that is a better athlete, a better shooter, and the type of player that Dan Hurley wants. So no to Matt Cross. And we'll talk about some other folks in like pretty much what's going on in this transfer portal. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised, but I am surprised. And we'll talk about what I'm surprised about and in the relation to UConn after this. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. For comprehensive financial news, analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, guys. So as it relates to UConn, if I pull up the transfer portal, what's interesting to me is the amount of players from good programs, what we perceive as good programs, going to different places. We just talked about Duke. Mark Mitchell leaving Duke probably has a lot to do with who they're bringing in from a freshman perspective with their top recruiting class. But, that it's Duke. You'd be surprised if people left Kansas. You'd be surprised. For me, I'm always surprised when someone leaves a major program like that. So that's one right off the bat. Jonas Adu doesn't surprise me because he looks like he's going to go to Carolina. And part of that is because they were recruiting him as a high school player. The biggest surprise to me, and it has nothing to do with the guys that came at me earlier in the year when we beat Alabama in the Final Four, it almost feels like there's a mass exodus from that Nate Oates Final Four team, right? You just had Nick Pringle enter the draft or enter the portal. Rylan Griffin, who I think would be a nice fit for UConn, good shooter, can get after it on defense a little bit. That stuff is really disconcerting. If you're Nate Oates, I don't think you have a ton of recruits coming in, and I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look at Nate Oates' recruiting class. But I mean, just think of these names, right? So the Kentucky stuff is warranted, right? Because you have a coach leaving, so you have Edu Tiori, who just talked about DJ Wagner, Zvonimir Visic left. Those guys. I mean, how about the Arizona guys all leaving? Omar Ballo. That's another red flag. People are like, oh, we should get Ballo. Absolutely not. This kid is leaving every school he goes to. Gonzaga, Arizona. Now he's going to Indiana. Good luck there. AJ Storr is another one. St. John's, Wisconsin. Now it looks like Illinois. These guys who are switching teams every year, this is what the old guys like me, I'm pointing to myself, this is why Dan Hurley hates the portal. The portal was supposed to be about this, in my opinion. You get a chance to use name, image, and likeness to start a brand the way Tarris Reed Jr. does. Or FAU, which is was a mid-major, is now playing in the American, so Power 6, if you will, loses a great young coach in Dusty May. And Dusty May goes to Michigan. What happens to his players, right? The transfer, the waiting out a year for a transfer, I feel like was always unfair. But now, like most ideas, they get co-opted and have all these great intentions, and then it goes haywire. So you got a guy like John L. Davis, Vlad Golden. Those guys are transferring because they feel like they're likely going to go probably to Michigan to be with Coach May. Or you have a guy that's like, I don't have a problem if you have a recruiting class like Cal just did, where all the guys are like, well, I don't want to get coached by Mark Pope. He hasn't convinced me. Those guys feel like you should be able to let them go. But we are, to go back to a rant by Tubby Smith, I didn't agree with it at the time, but over time, I think it has a lot to do with getting older, having kids, all that stuff. But we're teaching these kids how to quit. When something isn't exactly what they want, they just go someplace else to see if they can figure it out. Now, that's not the case for everyone, but you really are teaching someone like an Omar Ballo, who is, I think he got something like $1.2 million to go to Indiana. I mean, that's great and all, but that's not what NIL, in my opinion, was intended for. We really shouldn't be incentivizing the players to leave because NIL is going to offer them more in a different place. So that's me on my soapbox. I'm going to jump off it and start talking more about the hoops. But yeah, I mean, like, look at these guys. Like, I just, again, like a Jeremy Roach, that just surprises me. You're at Kentucky. Who else? Like, this one is not a surprise. This is a great one. Danny Wolf. He can go back and get his degree at Yale, and maybe he's already graduated. I'd have to look into it. But he's in the mix at Michigan and also in the mix at Carolina, both great public institutions. But he also wants to play at a high level in college basketball. So that doesn't surprise me one bit. But one that does surprise me is, again, Kylan Boswell. How did he go? He was a starter at Arizona. You're going to the Big 12. You're not being dissolved with the Pac-12. So they're going to go play big time college basketball in another big conference, and then you transfer to Illinois. It's just weird to me. Yeah, I just have a hard time with it. So, and for all the ones who were talking about how this is UConn related, I wanted to circle back to UConn. Vlad Golden played at Putnam in Connecticut as a freshman. So now I don't think he fit what UConn wanted in the transfer portal. And when I say that, guys, it doesn't mean that the player's bad. Just to kind of give everyone like some pause. So it looks like he's committed or almost 100% going to Michigan. So we didn't lose out on him. When we picked up a guy like Tarris Reed Jr., that's the only person who came for a visit. That's who we wanted. We didn't want Vlad Golden over him. We lost. There is no winners and losers in the portal, in my opinion. It's who you want to go after. If they don't want to come to you, then there's no point in trying to entice them. One bad recruit, one bad transfer portal can screw the whole team. So again, be careful what you wish for. So I think if I have to look into my crystal ball, I think we have a really good shot at Kobe Brea for a couple of reasons. One, they recruited him in the past. He didn't get an offer from us. He's become an incredible player. He has roots in New York City. To me, the pitch is come to UConn. Unless he goes to St. John's. That's my dark horse because, as I mentioned in the last game, St. John's, great. New York City legend, playground legend, great. Felipe Lopez is his godfather. So if the godfather asked you for one thing and it's to go to St. John's and play for Rick Pitino, you might have to say yes. But I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Cheers to everyone that's going on, that's liking the show. Really appreciate you. Go subscribe. Like, share it with your friends, share it with your UConn friends, share it with everybody. I'm really looking forward to the next couple weeks with some transfer portal news. We're going to stay hot and heavy with the basketball. I know some of you have asked about football. UConn football isn't where I feel like it needs to be, and until it does gets there, we're gonna stay with what I love. I love UConn basketball, but happy to talk about some football as it approaches. So. Remember, Locked On has launched its first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now and available on the free Fire TV channels app. This has been your host, Mark Zanetto, on another episode of Locked On UConn. Stay locked in. Stay connected. Make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.